I mean, look, let's just spare a thought for the good number of Second World War veterans who are still alive today and, who've marched down Whitehall so many times proudly, and solemnly. The cenotaph is arguably the most sacred spot in Britain. And they and their comrades fought to defend our rights and freedoms, including, of course, that freedom to protest. And they'll be forgiven for wondering, is this actually, is this the Britain that they fought to defend? And we've seen the cenotaph disgracefully, draped in Palestinian flags after a previous march a couple of weeks ago. The Prime Minister has acknowledged that there's a real risk that the cenotaph and other war memorials could be desecrated. And most importantly, I think equally importantly, that the 2-minute silence at 11 a.m. will be disrupted. And the risk of that is to
But also there could be trouble, there could be actual violence, because people are going down there and saying, no, you will not be doing this, and that's going to end in tears, isn't it?
Exactly. Now,
so
look,
what is the answer? What is the answer, Rafe? I mean, is the answer to either ban the march, and then people, like you quite rightly say, will say, oh, well, we haven't got free speech, or is it that they should be moving it to another area and not allowing it to happen anywhere near the cenotaph?
Well, I'm a free speech fundamentalist, and so this is not an attack on the freedom to protest. But they've had the freedom to protest for all of the days that they wanted to, 363 days of the year, except for Armistice Day and Remembrance Sunday, the sanctity of which must be preserved. So they got all the freedoms that they want to, but also, actually, just like Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion, the freedom to protest has to be balanced against the rights of other people.
So why aren't we doing this now?
If I can just say, what makes this even more important is that we have to also accept the rights of Jews and others to be able to walk on the streets of London without...
But it's also anti-British anyway. It's just anti-British.
Let me ask you, just as a historian, why have our police become so frightened of minorities? We live in a democracy, and the democracy means that the majority get to have their point of view, but we're a great democracy because every other bugger wants to come and live here.
Well, whether it be the rape gangs in Rotherham or whether it be this example that we have here, what we're seeing are a police force and indeed all of our institutions that have been petrified by political correctness for the best part of 30 or 40 years. And they don't know what to do. And we've seen clear evidence now over the course of since October the 7th, of the two-tiered policing that we have now in this country, whereby if you protest certain causes, you're treated with kid gloves and leniency, where you're allowed to shout jihad in the streets as a member of a group that's prescribed in many countries in the world. But if you go on a lockdown march, as we saw, there were 150 arrests during a 2020 lockdown march. There was a small EDL march that had 150 arrests. We saw what happened in that poor vigil for Sarah Everard, the girl who was murdered by Wayne Couzens, how the police reacted there. With this march, with 100,000 people, we've had no more than 10 people arrested at any of those single marches, and that's a disgrace. When Tracy Oberman, the actress, tweeted about this last week, she asked the policeman why they've been treating these protesters with kid gloves. She was told, there's simply too many haters. At its root, this is deeply anti-Semitic, and yet the police are emboldening these activists.
Why? I mean, you did probably hear of the breaking news we just found that a Met Police advisor led From the River to the Sea chant. A hard-left activist who was filmed doing this is a pro-Palestinian, at a pro-Palestinian rally, is advisor to the Metropolitan Police. I mean, it beggars belief.
If you remember the tweets that were coming out from the Met last week, they were choosing to find the most lenient interpretation for this ISIS flag and the jihad, and they said, we have experts here who are telling us...
It was weasel words, wasn't it? It was all weasel words.
Why have
these advisors who are actually the root of the problem? But it goes much deeper, because we have the College of Policing, you have these requirements now in the police to be university graduates. So the type of people who are becoming police officers today are a world away from Dixon of Dock Green.
But this is like all our institutions. They've all been captured, and we need to do, like in America when they did the anti-communist things, we need to do anti-woke and get all these woke out of NHS, out of the police, out of the BBC.
Should we make... Here's a good idea.
How are we going to do it?
Should we make woke a hate crime.
Well, that's what I mean. We need to root out wokery.
The point we were making earlier, Rafe, and nice to see you again, that the reality is this: we have laws already in place. The problem is about enforcement of it. Yeah. So actually, you can still have people marching. There's a fundamental right to protest, and it's a cornerstone of democracy, if you like. But you can impose restrictions. You can dictate the route, the number of people, how long it goes on.
You can ban it like they've done in France and Germany,
so
sensibly.
You can deal with that as an appropriate thing. The question is, which we were touching on earlier, is why is it not happening?
Rafe, why is it not happening, do you think?
Yes, well, remember, this is an operational decision. It's not up to the Home Secretary, it is up to the police.
I'm calling for the Chief Constable to quit. What do you think?
You're quite well. Yeah, I think the police commissioner has a lot to answer for, because he's a clever man. He understands a lot of these issues, but the way in which you're now seeing they're trying to sort of backtrack and try to be a bit more severe here. But contrast the reaction of our police compared to the French or the German, where they've got hundreds of people arrested and in prison. And and if you look at 81% of British Muslims identify as Muslim first and British second, compared with 46% in France.
Why do so many people want to come and live here? Why do all these people who don't like our culture, don't like the way we live,
well, they want to change it, don't they?
Why do they come and live here?
Well, obviously because they understand that the Western civilization that they loathe so much has advanced the world and has lifted it up and lifted more people out of poverty than anything else.
What would happen?
But of course,
Listen, Ray,
there's been no proactive advancement of British culture.
Yeah, okay.
We had the great policies of the 1980s and 90s, which we embraced multiracialism.
Rafe, sorry to be rude, Rafe, but they'll cut me off in a minute. You know what they're like with time on this. What would happen if I suddenly start saying, well, I think people shouldn't be allowed to wear these clothes where they cover themselves from head to toe. You can only see their eyes. I find that contrary to the culture of this country. I don't feel that is trying to integrate yourself at all, and I think it should be banned tomorrow. If I said that, seriously, all hell would break loose.
And yet, that's precisely what we're seeing happening in France and Switzerland and elsewhere. The Anglosphere is a very different place to other areas in the West, which are very happy to have earnest discussions on these very topics. Now, personally, as a person who believes in liberty, I believe people should be able to wear what they want, but I don't believe faces should be covered. I think we do need to actually have a law passed here which requires faces to be uncovered. And I don't refer just to the niqab. I also am thinking about all those Antifa types and people on these marches who have their
Well, they do
covered.
issue temporary orders that you can't have your face covered, and again, they're ignoring those laws when they're unenforcing them. You
know, and the other thing is that if we went to live in a Muslim country, then we wouldn't be allowed to do lots of things that in our culture we can do. And it's quite. I mentioned this is the third time I mentioned it, but it really does amaze me. You've got a group of people called Queers for Palestine. And if they were to live their life in that area of the world,
they wouldn't be living it very long.
They'd be locked up.
We're one of the most tolerant countries in the world. And
obviously, too tolerant.
Well, they would be locked up. They'd be killed.
So the whole thing about when in Rome.
All right. Last word with Rafe.
Go for it, Rafe.
We are having our rights and liberties used to undermine our culture and our civilization. Yeah. That's what's happening. And I said many times in many speeches, misogyny, homophobia, anti-Semitism are all on the rise in this country and in London and Birmingham particularly, and no one in the mainstream media is brave enough to point the finger where it deserves to be pointed, and we're seeing why anti-Semitism was on the rise every weekend in this city.
We've imported
Rafe, thank you very much indeed. We'll talk again, I'm sure. Good to get your point on this.